Chapter 1. When it started. Section 1 Deprivation to Life. SRS reported, on, law enforcement officer, Marshall's son Mark Marshall and Trevor Stroda, that came from another place. Charged with rape on 3 kids while using drugs. While caught in the act. When I was about 8 years old, something bad happened to me. 4 years old boy. Knowing somewhat of the 4-year-old boy because he would always have followed me around in town. Weird but to understand, I asked him once or twice about following me. Also, about rumors of, his parents are strict and that he was adopted, but that was just words. A short pause from him as I questioned him about it. To his response was surprised and I was told. Basically, something about government as pointed towards, a direction upwards. That his mom is his mom but the other one was not. Looking towards the front end of the trailer as other one meaning a man or stepfather who we can hear from standing on 7th Street. His mother who I could see, was halfway out the side deck, of a sliding glass door. It would be called, the back door of a trailer house or, mobile home. These trailers were at the end of the street, 4 of them facing the side road. The rest of them were normal as like usual trailer parks facing the street. So, his house looked sideways from the rest on 7th Street. The driveway came in from South Park Street. From the alleyway between 8th Street and 7th Street. Seeing his mother, I could see a sort of resemblance but did not see the other person. He asked me how I knew. I told him if you didn't notice, while I was pointing around at trailer homes that, there are kids that usually come out to play, every day as trailer park homes in the neighborhood would. The military base of Fort Greely is right next to Ogden, Kansas as well. I think this was prior to going to that park that day where those boys came, meaning Mark and Trevor. He said that his parents would fight a lot. For him following me before this, for about a few months or more. We talked about this near the end, walking down 7th Street passing my house and his to the wood line. I caught him one other time last recesses before school got out. About 80 feet away him standing holding the fence, easy to see. Once I got my backpack and he was still there. He would walk along with me home, talking along the way of, him describing in details, of the question I asked him. That about him following me, watching me, and asking if he seen the 3 fights I got into that day? Yes, he said and he did say while pointing at, inside of chain-linked fence of school and school playground. To say that those guys back there, are mean. Probably meaning my classmates. I told him not to worry about anyone, because they all respect me. I never started any fights, it was some people think, it's okay to fight the smallest person out there. Even kids come up to me asking to handle bullies of theirs. Being sent to the office with half the classroom but from upper grades from mine too. Everyone's hand would go up covering me when the principal already knew it's me. But principal liked me but has to do his job. I helped people and that was natural to me and not noticing what I'd done. Nick. The story of this, is also related to how much it shows that, an individual can influence the environment around you. My best friend who is in a better place, Nicholas Woods was a new student in my class and started in between. The entire school liked him and it was because of looks. All the girls in my sister's class, were going crazy nuts over him, to add as to the rest of all of them. So, I knew because it was going to be different. My thoughts in my head were trying to figure this out. Hopefully I don't make a fool myself when they're calling his name. Jealousy is obvious, but it's natural or normal to feel as the way it all went. It was roaring with his name not long after a day or two. But I wanted to be his friend, and the feeling is just learning curb. I was also the top of my class, confidently and to not realizing I was making the smartest girl come in 2nd place every time. Until almost about a while until someone told me about her near the ending of grade 4. So, I left one question blank and waited for her. She was the prettiest girl in the classroom. I didn't know or thought like that. Basically, marriage and being successful. No sexual desires, my mother shielded me from bad things like movies we were watching. To cover my eyes, while spend family time together. But watching Chucky was okay and just not Jason or Michael mirrors for nudity. Watching only cartoons naturally and I was a big mama's boy. I was thinking about marriage when I grow up and my own special woman. When it happened, it was in the gym room, courtroom. He came up to me saying things about my name and speaking for me about I am mad about people calling his name and not mine. Punched in the face, I didn't counter this time, I told him no matter what you do, I am going to be your friend. He punched me about 4 times and stopped, while holding his hand. Before he hit me people are counting on it, basically. I don't care about them. I could see the tears coming out but he held it in. Then throughout hitting me and he broke his wrist very badly and made it way worse. I walked out of the gym and was completely fine. The next day he came to him saying the same thing I said, about I don't care about what everyone thinks. And that we are best friends for life. About Nicholas Woods, he's a part of my story later on and it's very important to mention him. Always within my prayers. Love you brother. Anyways, about the 4-year boy walking with me. That he was keeping an eye on me, and it was obvious. Maybe it was like, he looks up to a person like a big brother meaning. But still it felt like something was off and like a spy. Because I felt it in a way at the beginning to also feel he didn't say. As I asked him your parents? No, he replied. Also, he said he would watch me all the time from his home. I questioned him as before but about how could he see me like that, from home. with me being in a confused state for a little bit and thought nothing of it. I just agreed to it, by nodded of the head and continued. When I questioned him about those things, he went from frightened, worried, and pausing to think kinda way. Saying he's always there, the question naturally formed, his behavior was in a nervous way of pointing at places, in halfway pointing. I said the trailer house or homes. I was kind of surprised and saying, cool. To hide and stay out of trouble. To confused state feeling, of everything while at home, conversation to him not giving details. I had no clue whatsoever. I would have to explain to him as what hiding meant. As I thought nonsense, to even pointing his fingers toward the trees and bushes. Because I was unaware most of the times, I seen him, several times, of him being around. Being well known of the surroundings, while never plays with other kids. While at home. Of course, I was young and thought nothing of it and to move on. It was more than he didn't know what he was trying to say. This was just to keep in mind as a person. When I coming or going to school and back to my house, he would follow. There were 3 other younger kids as well. The place it happened was in Ogden, Kansas 8th Street. Chris and Corey Dory. As walking along South Walnut Street, down towards 7th Street. A group of kids on the sidewalk was talking while stationary. They were between 12th Street and Ashwood Alley. The boy and I was walking on the road in the right lane. A friend of mine, as he would think for the very first time, out of nowhere. Walking over to me, yelling. That if I wanted to fight and that I'm afraid of him or coward. I yelled back at him saying that I already had got into 3 fights and I am tired. To add on, but if you want to fight, let's fight. He was kinda scared walking closer to me on the road. His girlfriend said something like kick his butt for me. Like I told you to. He would whisper, I don't want to fight you or know how to fight. Tell me you don't want to fight me and that you are a chicken, or something like that. I told him that, I can fight you, but that's what you want? So, I did say what he suggested though. Then they kept running their mouths to us, while walking along the street. I did set the record straight because them talking too much trash, not long after by responding back, that he was the chicken. That of what he said, and following her orders to her being immature of her age basically. Told them to shut up and kept on walking. Still walking, finally at 7th Street. Ages of kids around 4 to 11 years of age. 2 young men ages 17 and almost 18 and the other one is 18. Their names, Mark Marshall and Trevor Stroda, were not from around and from another place. There was a little park at the end of 7th Street, next to South Park Street. Just some sand, a tractor tire that's buried in sand. Next to a woodline and private salvage yard, that's private property. It's where most kids would go out to play. They approached us and said that they ran out of gas. They were manipulating and luring us to go help them, which they think that we could fix it, very ensuring that we could. Body movements of arms reaching out, like directing cows by hurling or, being in defense formation, playing basketball. They changed the subject as in, interest in looking at a bus, camper, house on wheels or like a clubhouse. It was only 3 to 4 houses down on South Park on 8th Street. Behind 331, 8th Street, the house that everyone in the neighborhood knew, Scott, his daughter who is mentally disabled, and wife who had passed on a time ago. I was the one telling those kids while walking with them that they are strangers. Haven't you learned that in school? Let's run for it. But they were much bigger than us, the 4-year-old boy said, yeah, the others said. One girl and another boy. Even those 2 older guys, said they were much bigger than us too. With that being said, to add on about a saying, that seeing someone in trouble to helping people in need. That is what they needed and what we are doing is a good deed. I was on the right end as, we meaning, 4 of us were side by side. I was next to the 4-year-old boy, next to him was another boy. He was about around my age and on the left end was, the 4-year-old girl. All in the while, Mark was bouncing from 2 on the left to us as they seem excited, and guarding if anyone tries to run for it. Trevor in front of the 2 kids on left. The picture of this street can be found on Google Maps, the link for it is, https://www.google.com/maps. Anyways, from Mark and Trevor it all sounded as a lie to me. So, I said while approaching the house, 331 on 8th Street, I knew that man. They said he wasn't home, and I said he is home, and that he is always there, or home like Scott had said. They responded, we knocked on the door, looked through the windows, and tried to change subject as they knew him. To camping out in his backyard all weekend long. That they said that they needed to get out, from behind that man's yard. Before he comes home because they didn't know him. As they ran out of gas, from being broken down, having to push it up the incline with the bus out of sight. To them clearly making it a point, that no one is there. I didn't knock on the door a lot and the idea of that. I also started to look through the window, next to the door I was knocking on. Mark said he knocked and looked through all the windows. Then to mention that he's not there. While there was no answer to the door, to Mark constantly pestering, in every way possible to be guided to the bus. The other kids went inside the bus, and a good comparison to it, is a short bus like an old, Salina City Go bus. Also known as the short bus, handicap bus, and special people's bus. A prison bus that's all white, or a Salina Rescue Mission bus mostly white, with light brown or brown lettering on it. With all trims still on it but not the letters. The bus in backyard of Scott's house. They went to the bus entrance, and went in after with Trevor. I was about the last one in to enter, to be like the big brother. As he was younger than I was 4 years old. With Mark, basically standing by door. Using his hand on the door, like he's holding it open. I was cautious about those two older guys, as I went inside. Trevor sat near the back, opposite of driver's side second seat, to the end of bus seat. With the girl and other boy, doing inappropriate things with Trevor while using crystal meth. The other one across from me and the 4-year-old, standing halfway out in the aisle. In the seat behind the one I was sitting. Where I was sitting was the passenger side, near the front, as second seating to avoid hassle from Mark's polite demands. Also, it was for escape or survival tactics when he moves to the back. Mark across from me in the other seat. Mark saying, "Isn't this the coolest thing you ever seen?" And, how it was like a house. House that moves to say it was like an RV. A house on wheels to also say a clubhouse. Tried to explain it to us, enjoying their personal life. Then those kids in the back with Trevor spoke, that they already knew and were excited about it. That it's finally happening, like Christmas morning. Trevor was communicating, saying like an interview. As Mark agreed, as a job we would have to get a job, so this is like an application. Also to add by saying, we needed to go through an initiation or like an orientation. So as the obvious, Trevor too, as what he was doing with those two kids, as far as I knew, what they wanted us to do. I started to question Mark about it, as confirming what we have to do. That the only thing in my mind was, stranger danger and what I learned in school. Use of drugs systol methamphetamines. Answering my question with, a yes. But needed to explain the clubhouse or job. As for benefits goes, basically. Just as I expected, I heard enough. For the only thing I constantly worried about, I did not want a part of it. I said Mark wanted me to hear them out. Mark talks about a drug and that they use. Making you feel awesome, smarter, faster and last longer. Trevor was over fascinating himself with those two little kids. To add more to this. Super strength like 10 times the average human and Superman was talked about. To feel like an actual real superhero. The pipes that each one had, was used in the open, also showing us. After telling me that, I wanted to try some. To what the pipe looked like, I was curious before it was in their hands. The whole time, it's like candy and have to wait he told me. I questioned about it meaning ages from 7 years old to 10. A maybe at 10, said that it's young and have to wait. Trevor and Mark talked of until we do that sexual thing. As candy was mentioned again as to saying that Trevor's private part was like candy, Mark trying to explain to me. Like a lollipop, then I said, pointing at the glass pipe that looks exactly like a lollipop, like that? The other kids were encouraging Mark. Somewhat I looking at Trevor and back at Mark throughout the whole time. To notice and explain that Trevor was constantly hitting the pipe, while he was being touched. Mark was holding his in hand a lot to be obvious. The topic on the vehicle problem, gas is empty and saying, someone will be here. Also, that they're on their way, but lying. To steer back on track, Mark saying once again, all I'm saying, is to hear me out. Basically, a planned out life and do anything you want with a successful career. A good life versus a hard life. In my case to refusing is, loose end or death and they're both the same. Safe and protected by authorities and plans your career, what you'll do in life. This was about 1997 about when I was 10, I believe. I have found out a lot more since, I have lived in Salina, Kansas. Throughout 2012 through 2019 or present time. To figure out. That why and who stolen my life. To check with Mark, as Trevor, asking him about having a hand towel. Mark went back there. Meanwhile I acted fast, for a chance to talk to the 4-year-old boy. I lowered my voice to him, about wanting to get out of here and be saved. That I'll help him just hold onto my hand. He said how could we get out, they're bigger than us and that the bus door was not going to open. Then he explains that there is a lever and a grown person or someone big has to do it. I was only concerned of the door as from the start as entering it. Watching how worn out it was, inside to see him close it. I told him the bus door is weak and broken. That I could squeeze out with ease of bus door, with the middle gap opening. That was 1 inch to 1.5 inches open while flimsy looking. Told him to trust me on this, he agreed to call things I said. Mark comes back, he tried to persuade as saying to think, of a lollipop. Like it's candy just to think of it like that. It's just like it, about clubs and clubhouses, with rules. Then trying to force initiation and said after Trevor says, hurry up. A better life, opportunities and power of protection, basically. Loss of resources and later to find out in their town or place of human and child profiteering. Also, human rights violations, to child at conscience to train them to be looked as a cop and treated as one too. They need to make a federal code of federal human trafficking because there isn't one. All natural resources in life, like jobs, diploma, services, friends, bills, housing etc. To be fully under control with corruption. The 14 Amendments. Section 1. Taking a person's life and liberty. Deprive them of all things, public corruption, voice to skull harassment, electronic harassment and much more. The first attempt for loose end. Then as Trevor was asking about crystal meth, his bowl is empty and for more. To Mark going back there again. I might not get another chance like this one, and it was time to make a break for it, to escaping, knowing at 100% sure that the 4-year-old boy was on board of Riku's plan. But to forgot about him because it was a sudden. I rushed to the bus doors, surprise Mark, to climb up on seat rest, to hop over and jumping from seat to seats. I was at the last second to turn around and go up the stairs to reach top and see Mark. To arm and hand distances away, I couldn't go back to save the kid. I ran for the door again. Then I was stuck at the door, that wasn't easy to push open. Mark was there above threatening that, he will come down there. I was already slowing walking up saying I know I am coming back. Maybe I can try. I passed by Mark. Mark walks me back shoving and pushing me back between the aisle of the backrest of first seats. Mark now standing with one foot on the first seat, behind the driver's seat and the other leg on the railing or divider from entrance steps. I was a foot or closer from Mark and the 4-year-old was behind me or halfway out in the aisle. To seating. The door is locked, he was bigger than me and said, I was going nowhere. Mark hunched over looking at me. To me being struck very hard across my face as well, as my face turned to the side as in, with his hand that struck my face meaning to not let us go nowhere as Trevor and Mark was communicating back and forth but while Trevor couldn't move as too busy. I see another escape route, but it was going to be tricky. Because it was going through a gap, under his legs and out the bus door. Then to launch myself by throwing my body through the door. Basically, flying and missing all steps. That should do it with how things looked with that bus door. I turned to my friend and said, are you still with me, to get out of here? The 4-year-old boy was cautious and said, that he wanted to stay and listen to them. Because it makes sense now, to what his mother is doing and the stepfather was saying. Left, main leader Solman. Works at SPD right, fake/leader aka. Ringleader, Mark Marshall. Works at Schwann's. To the left picture, the file of video was copied over, using the same automated save name, as it sounds, being trashed by itself. The screenshot was right before what it was about. A new friend joined the group but got pulled over, following the other friends in a cruise. As typically as what they do, driving around town. The message comment was, what the F# at the officer we all know was doing. Also to read more onto that comment later. Said in relied that officer didn't know as to being in the group. People don't get pulled over in the group. The second wind. Talking, while out of nowhere, running as tactical surprise to escape. Second attempt to make a break for it and save a life. The boy said, he wants to have a better life. And that we should hear them out. I told him they are going to rape you. He responded that he doesn't mind and that everything they are saying makes sense, because that's the problems his parents too, always arguing about. His mother didn't like it most of women being treated there. Only woman is looked at as a womb, and treated like trash too. If being an officer of the law. He didn't like the guy who is a stranger. Meaning parents. More to that later. He was scared naturally at the escape plan failed. I would have tried to save them all but the others were too far back there. As I was talking to him to make sure as well as needing cooperation like, insurance of 110% sure of saving his life, as sharing my plans with him grabbing on my wrist with a lock. Mark said, you know I can hear everything you're saying, it's not going to work. I then turned my head to the side and I replied, I know, and I wasn't whispering to be correct, while turning my head back. I told the 4-year-old, if he wanted to be saved as I could save him, guaranteed. To ensure him I would do all the work in my hands, have my full body lock. That I would do that for him. To get into details on lock is explain best to a ledge or mountain situation. If the falling person is locked in with the one saving and saving one as well locked in. If locked in and slipping farther to death, meaning bodies at the ending point and would not, ever let go. Distraction tactics. I knew naturally that my body and strength, as well as my heart, that I could without thinking. Took a few times to ensure to him, that I could save him. Finally, after the third time asked as he said yes. I told him to stick out his arm and hand also never to let go. But he can hear us. I countered with, I know. Just trust me and I would do all the work, that even dragging him off is half my size. I would think he would fly out of there, if you know what I mean. But he was worried it was not going to work, but he was aboard with my plan. The plan was set. The only plan I didn't say but kept in mind was distraction. When I was talking or as during talking, I gunned it, talking as a distraction tactic. With me, grabbing his wrist fast and didn't feel lock on by him. But I wasn't thinking because I knew he was listening and I wasn't stupid. As I went under his leg, he drops down between us, to lift back up from awkwardness. Then do some weights, body position as to being stuck or trapped. Mark's back against mine, complicating the capture. Something snagged like a fishing hook under a rock but more like an anchor stuck under a mountain as second pull. I tried to pull without looking then to look back after the second pull. Mark's head crouching down looking under and between his legs at me. Mark then jumps completely over the 4-year-old as he did at a point look under his leg to a behavior, actions, and shocked. Basically, flipping out. Surprising that 4-year-old boy wasn't working with me but to slam his other hand on the backrest of the seat. With his right foot on the metal base support to trying hold onto me, with the brace as for seeing what was holding me back. Hold onto him, Mark said. When I see what the problem was, I ripped out of his arm and wrist lock. Mark was closing in on me as I jumped to throw myself out by missing most steps on bus, then pushed myself the rest of way out. Mark did try to grab me to hold lever while bracing himself. Then to launch himself towards me as I was out. Mark grabs my left side, long selves at the end where my hand would be to ripping out of his grip. The 4-year-old boy I tried to save almost cost me my life. But just as I predicted, from the first attempt at the door, that my body would force me through it, if I jumped and slammed through the worn old bus doors. Mark stood at the bus door with both hands on each side of the door trims. Then saying come back, that he's faster. He switched the hand closest to the front of the bus to both hands on one side for advantage or for leverage. As one on the trim and other on the vertical support rail, then both hands on trim as positioning. I was standing 5 feet away from the bus door and him. He then talked as, he's bigger than me, and said, come back, as to use talking like I did, as a distraction. To slingshot his body by swinging back and forth on beginning of handrail. Then released out to try and grab me. Slipping out as his fingertips but did not firmly grab a hold of me. He yells stop. Now I was facing in the opposite direction and head turned, in a sort of looking back as to shoulder. Using my peripherals as a wing guard would do in a basketball game. Trevor said, what's the problem? Basically, because I was a kid. While Trevor still molesting those 2 kids, that he said Mark needed to get me back on the bus and no loose ends. Also, that the boss said so if this happens. Mark stuck his head back inside and said who? The boss, and that he should know that or who he's talking about. I know that. He responds back. Also said that he, meaning Trevor, already knows that what Mark is capable of doing. Boasting child threats. That he kills little babies and also kids. Conversations between them to then threatening me that he kills kids, also trying to use manipulating words to be friends like. After saying all that, plus that he is bigger, faster, stronger and it would be an ease. Also said if I don't get back. That he would, and drag me back on the bus. I told him good luck, I'm faster, as well as I would scream while running. The word help. Without saying I also had another idea of distraction and making myself a lot faster. By slipping out of shoes as of past childhood friends would race and I was the fastest kid to add. I kept it quite so I could survive. I also questioned for him to explain what loose end was, as Trevor mentioned as well. After he explains that, Mark said no and that he was not trying to do that, just don't tell. I told him I wouldn't and that I would walk back home. He said, how do I know or trust you, he said. Also told me while trying to be nice, to come back on the bus and don't tell anybody. Letting some guards down to explain. I would walk back and that was enough trust. In addition to that, as I was trying to explain it while Mark jumps out at me, way more than last time and barely got me. I doubled back to 2 steps in running to stop. As I felt the grazed of wind on my hand to start running a few steps. He yelled please stop. And again, like a wing guard, head tilted at shoulder, I was in a frozen spot like a track star at the start line. As real as it gets, my feelings are at the edge, at this point. Please stop, don't run, and scream, he asked. Just to note that it is about 3 or 5 more times I faced death or close to being murdered. By the first or second attempts and expression with behaviors I knew how dangerous it was. Mark begging for me to stop and hear him out. I told him I will run the next time without looking back. If you make 1 step or even move a hair I will. With a tone in my voice of not stupid or joking. Mark was stunned without words, frozen solid. Short pause to me speaking again. Told him to back up to me speaking again. Told him to back all the way up as bus door. He steps 1 or 2 steps backwards. To his 1 foot a step in front from his other foot, that's by the bus door. As being stubborn, I said again. Reinforcing words as serious, talk. Back all the way up. He backed that foot in as a 10 hut. I then spoke up once more, back up. He said he couldn't go back any farther. How can I trust you or believe? I can trust you not to tell, Mark asked. I told him that I have hear from those 2 other kids, also the 4-year-old. Trevor asking again about what is taking so long, that he can't handle a little kid. Mark responded back trying to explain of what he had just heard. Trevor was still on the loose end subject. Please don't tell, and that Mark was taking my words but still wasn't good enough. Again, to say come back on the bus. A quick pause to him changing back on to topic, asking me to turn, all the way around and face him. I turned sideway a little,